If I can just stuff my head with enough knowledge,
trying to prove whether spiritual mind treatment works or not,
I'll become more spiritual.
You never want to believe something just because somebody said it.
We have to make a move.
You have to prove it to me.
take the information, put it to practice, and see if it works for you.
Put it into action.
Welcome to Truth Be Told. We're so excited to be here again. Another week, week 62. This month, this year, we are doing Living Everyday Wonder. And tonight, we are on our weekly theme of Prove It. How do we know if any of this stuff does anything for us? Well, we put it to practice and we give it a shot and see if it works or not. That's how we prove it to ourselves. That's how we determine what we want to continue, which practices work individually, which ones we could care less for. And that's basically how we live life. But now we're doing it with intention, using that thing bigger than us and enjoying every bit of it. So I hope that you're interested in this. Sit back and enjoy Truth Be Told.
Now, I don't know about you, but my spiritual journey up until now has found a lot of comfort in the head, the academic, the intellectual, the figuring out, the theology, the philosophy. You know what I'm talking about. All those things that we seek to know, and this idea that when we know more, then we can experience more. Or if I can just stuff my head with enough knowledge of spiritual things, then somehow I'll become more spiritual. And so then my head has become a swirl of quotes and philosophies and ideologies, and the list goes on and on. But what I'm recognizing now more than ever is that this understanding, this intellectual, this academic, this knowledge-based understanding of spirituality is important. But we have to make a move. We have to make a shift from this, what I would call yoga mat understanding, this contemplative understanding where we sit on our meditation cushion, or we sit in our offices or our sacred spaces in our house, and we contemplate the mysteries of the universe, and we become more and more close to this divine understanding, and that's amazing. But the real adventure, the real way that this really becomes actualized in our lives is when we move from that space. We use everything that we have learned and gained and grown and transformed as in that space, and then we take it out into our everyday life. So it becomes more of this thing that Thich Nhat Hanh would call engaged spirituality, and within his own tradition he called it engaged Buddhism. But for our purposes here, we'll just call it engaged spirituality. And so this idea that takes us off of our meditation cushions, it takes us off of our yoga mats, and really calls us to live the principles in which we've learned. It calls us to activate those areas where we have grown and transformed and evolved in, and activate them in the everyday experiences of our lives. Activate them in our engagement with others, activate them in our jobs, activate them in just all aspects of our lives. And so then it becomes less about what we know and more about how we act and how we activate these principles in our lives. Because it is when we use them, it is when we take these things we know to be true and actually apply them to the circumstances of our lives, That's where the true magic happens. That's where the demonstration happens. That's where the manifestation happens. That's where we get a front row seat to the activating power of these principles. So it's not enough just to know it, but when we can shift that knowing into this kind of activating sort of energy, then we can actually make it work in our lives. And for a long time, I had all this knowledge in my mind, and I would look out in my life, and things were still a mess. And, things are often messy. That's what life is. But I had this knowledge base, but I really wasn't seeing it outpictured in my life. So it was this book knowledge that really kind of stayed in the book. And so the call of this prove it sort of theme that we're talking about this week is to take it out of the book and actually apply it. Finding ways in each and every day to utilize, to activate these principles that we talk about in the circumstances of our lives. And when we do this, we can see that these principles, these theologies, these philosophies are not a static entity. But instead, they have energy, they have flow, they have power, they have movement. And we can only experience that when we actually take it out of that kind of static realm of just knowledge and we actually activate it into our lives. And so that is the call, to get off our meditation cushion and actually put it into action. And it's then that we can really prove it.
Yeah. When you said that thing about it's, time for us to get up off our meditation pillow, I just immediately had these flashbacks to conversations that we had probably years ago at this point around, so much of the new thought kind of communities and organizations are just kind of hanging on to this like 1980s, 1990s self-help thing, and everybody's still trying to pitch the next workshop, the next book, the next event, the next retreat, and like those things are great, but there's only so many of those that you could go to or participate in before at some point you have to realize like there is not a magic bullet. There's no pill to take. There's no magic wand to wave that's like, poof, your life is perfect because you went to this retreat. Your life is perfect because you read this book. You went to this work, right? Like, because that's kind of how we sell them. Like, not we particularly, but we at large, we kind of try and advertise like, hey, this is the thing. If you do this thing that we're talking about in this workshop, you're golden. And everybody's looking for that magic pill that's like, finally, the thing that's going to fix this so I don't actually have to do anything to fix all this.
Right. It's just a cycle. It's a cycle of...
Yeah. And it'd be great. Imagine if there really was, if there was like a magic spell, we could just poof, everything's great. And we didn't actually have to change anything of ourselves, of our experience, of how we're living and operating and moving, right?
Right.
But it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. It is that energy and that action. We got to actually do something.
Yeah. And I think some of that's like just a matter of even taking a certain level of personal responsibility for, certainly not in any way insinuating take responsibility of the things that happened to you, right? Because if we are at that place where there are things happening to us, that's a whole other state. But when we step into, okay, I'm done having things happen to me and I'm going to start co-creating my life, then there is an element of responsibility that we take for what we are creating.
Right.
And that's not always fun.
We have to mingle with other folks when we do that. We can't just stay in the four walls of our house.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think, a lot of it too, it comes down to like intention, like having that idea of like, this thing right now. Yeah, that's the one. Like, we could still enjoy like, what we're studying, reading, enjoy a nice retreat.
Yeah.
but enjoying it for what it is, as opposed to like some magic pill, like you said. And then have a deeper appreciation for what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because I think it is a balance. I mean, it's not saying that the classes we take or the things we read or our own contemplative practice, those things are the foundation. I really do believe those things are the framework in which we can then operate like out. So once we have this framework, we have this kind of blueprint, then we take that and then we actually apply it to here and apply it to here and apply it here, because otherwise it's just words.
Yeah.
But I'm not discounting those things. I love a good intellectual conversation, but when we take it to the next level, where we could take these things that are swirling in our brains and actually rub with other folks, that's where we then see the power of principle working.
Yeah.
It becomes more than just this kind of one-dimensional words on a page. It becomes this 3D sort of out picturing, and that's the joy of it. That's the life right there, the spiritual life.
Yeah. And I think there is a certain amount of discomfort in embracing that idea, right? Like some of the intellectualizing can feel more comfortable because that's how most of the world operates, especially like in Western society. We do overly intellectualize a lot of things. And so to intellectualize something like this teaching tends to feel more comfortable because it also gives us that buffer from having to look at and kind of face head on the stuff that is showing up.
Right.
Every experience becomes a gentle... Oh, where'd it go?
Oh, it disappeared.
Yeah. Every experience becomes a gentle incline to the depth rather than this thing being the thing. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I love it. All right. Shall we go ahead?
I was just gonna say, I think too, we're at this place in our society and collective existence to where, like, we've always kind of like sectionalized, like this is our spiritual thing. We do this on the weekend, and then we go to work, and we're just in work mode. Mm-hmm. We're now like at this place where like, what do we have to bring to the unfolding of how things need to be?
It's like
putting this into practice where we live and where we work and where we play and
and the integrating it, because that's where the power is in the integration.
Yes,
of everything.
Everything.
Imagine. All right, shall we jump into a little more?
Do it.
All right, here we go. Let's do it.
This week, we are looking at the theme of prove it. So, when we talk about the science of mind and all that it entails, we are encouraged to learn and practice several different spiritual traditions that have been around for the ages. We use spiritual mind treatment, which is another way of saying prayer, or we say affirmative prayer. We use meditation, mindfulness. We may use gratitude practice, visioning. We have a whole list of things that we can do that help bring us closer to that something bigger. That's one of the fundamental tenets of science of mind, and one of the most common sayings that we attribute to Ernest Holmes. He liked to say, there is a power in this universe greater than we are, and we can use it. So why would we want to use it? Well, ultimately, it aids in our expansion, our expression, our experience of this one life that we get in this physical world that we are living right now exactly as we are. So the most common, or maybe like the core spiritual practice that the science of mind teaches, is the idea of affirmative prayer, or as we call it, spiritual mind treatment, where we are knowing something in our consciousness, believing that there is one overarching consciousness of which we are all little kind of pinpoints and expressions of. So as we know one thing in our mind, it is known in the one creative mind of the universe, which then allows it to be manifest in our experience here. Now, trying to prove whether spiritual mind treatment works or not is kind of it's a tricky proposition. There's so many other factors that make it difficult. For one, to do studies on the power of prayer is considered inherently impossible by most scientists, simply because if you have a control group, one group is getting prayed for, the control group is not. How do we know for certain that the control group really isn't? There's just always going to be that uncertainty, because this is all in mind. It is not a tangible thing. So that makes it challenging. Now for me, and I guess this is really all of us, the one thing that I really respect and admire about Ernest Holmes, and the reason why he called it religious science, or the science of mind and spirit, is because he didn't expect us just to take his word for it from all the research and compilation that he did to create this philosophy. He encourages everyone to take the information, put it to practice, and see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, then I wouldn't imagine you would keep doing it. But there's a lot of people that continue to deepen their experience of this practice because it does seem to work when we apply the principles. Now, I could give you a list of things that have manifested in my life that I attribute to spiritual mind treatment. And any skeptic could come along and trace the path. When I have what we call a demonstration, which is really just another way of saying our prayer answered, the demonstration is the result. It, in my experience, doesn't show up like a miracle, poof, there's your demonstration. It shows up in a way that's logical to our mind, the way that it unfolds. We meet one thing, we meet one person, we hear one thing that leads to this, to that, to this, and the next thing we know, we have our demonstration. It's very easy to say that that is all coincidence, and I can't deny that that is a possibility. But for me, having enough demonstrations unfold, I'm a believer. So if that practice brings me results, I'm going to continue to do it. Now, one other thing, on just a pragmatic level, if I'm having anxiety about some sort of life experience, and I go into prayer over that to try to realize the outcome that I would lean towards, opening up to the best possible outcome. If that process of going within, quieting myself, and going into prayer somehow alleviates the anxiety around the issue, well, that's beneficial right there. And that also can have effect on how it unfolds. If I relieve that anxiety, then the way that I show up in different situations is going to be different. When I relieve that anxiety, tension in the mind, I might come up with more creative solutions had I not done whatever it was to calm myself, the meditation, which is used with spiritual mind treatment in my practice. So it opens up like more creativity to where I can come up with a solution that I didn't see before. That's beneficial. So at the very least, whether you believe in the power of prayer or not, if it brings alleviation of anxiety, if it brings the opportunity for more creativity, why wouldn't you give it a shot? And I know we're all on our own individual journeys. I'm not here to convert anybody. We have nothing to really convert to. It's just a way of thinking, a way of living. But if it resonates with you, and if you would like to know more about spiritual mind treatment, how to do this for yourself, drop us a line. You can write info@soulvolutioncollaborative.org, or you can leave a comment in the comment section underneath this video, and we'll get back to you. We'll let you know that it's pretty simple to learn, and the more you practice, the better you get at it, the more your consciousness is tied into that bigger thing. Don't just take our word for it. Take it, apply it in your life, and see how it unfolds for you.
The thing that, and I've heard, Chris, I've heard you talk about affirmative prayer a lot. It's amazing. But it's so funny how you worded it. Something clicked that I don't think I'd ever really realized before. I think, sometimes when we apply affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment to, let's just say, a situation in our life, and then someone may do the same in their life for the same situation, and then the demonstration is different in both for this person and for me. But how you worded it, that it is a natural progression of who we are. that the demonstration then becomes this natural progression. So what may show up as abundance for me may look different for someone else, because the natural progression of their consciousness, a natural progression of mine, and how my mind works, and how my psyche and all those sort of things, it just becomes this natural out picturing of who I am. And that just hit really like on the money, because I'm like, yes, because I think sometimes, especially, well, I'll just say for me, we can get into this kind of comparison mode, like, oh, but what about that person? How come I don't have that? Or how it looks for that person.
Yeah.
But I think when we're really clear about who we are, our values, the things that are important to us, how we want to show up, and then we do affirmative prayer from that space, then the natural out picturing is just the natural flow of who we are. And we know that we're all individualized expressions. And so my expression is going to be different than your expression or someone else's expression. And I know that just clicked for me. That kind of calmed that comparison voice that often gets really, really loud, but it kind of like, whoop, it got real quiet all of a sudden. I'm like, that's it. Yeah. So I appreciate that perspective. That's good stuff.
Yeah. And also to add to that, like, I think at times we can kind of do this thing to ourselves where, well, treatment there is a method to treatment. And if we follow this method, then if we want this and we do this treatment, then this is, A plus B equals C or whatever, right? Like that's what should happen. And we do this thing to ourselves where A plus B, we get a jumble of whatever, and it's not the thing we thought it should look like. And so we like beat ourselves up or blame things. We just play these games where it's like we think it should be super crystal clear, and it's not. And yet, in the grand scheme of things, A plus B always equals C. And how does that demonstrate in front of us? Well, like Chris, like you said, there are so many variables to that as to what does C actually look like here? What do we actually believe about C? What does the world believe about C? Is C something we really want? Does C play into our vision of whatever? It's like, I think it's that there's kind of this reductionist view of science of mind where, well, you want A, so you say B in your prayer and you have C. Mm-hmm. That's how it should work. And it's like, yeah, kinda. Sure, kinda, a little bit. And Chris, I don't want to give away too much because you have this perfect lead into the next segment, but kind of introducing that like scientific way of thinking about it. Because I think we do get some guff from the science community about being a pseudoscience because people, well, it's not scientific method, it's not repeatable and provable, and it's like, A, that's not really what science is in total. That's a part of science. And B, science is of this physical world, right? And so when we try and take the rules of science based on the physical world, like Newtonian physics is all about figuring out this physical plane of existence. And because of it, the way it is developed and how the rules it created for itself, it can't explain things outside of that. Right. And so when we're trying to use a scientific way of thinking about things that science can't explain, science as we know it right now can't explain, it's like, is that, I don't know, is that science or not? I mean, I don't really care if it is or isn't. I mean, it's a scientific way of thinking. But there's this whole, non-physical realm that we're trying to, apply this scientific way of thinking and say there are laws that if we do this is what happens.
Right. I think one thing that's interesting when you talk about the people that give us guff, like how do you know you can't prove that? It's, absolutely. And like, yeah, you're right. I can't. And I'm not here to like double down and try to force you to see my way.
Yeah.
But But what's interesting is a lot of times the people that give the loudest guff are very adamant that that there is nothing there, that none of this can possibly exist. And you can't prove that either.
Right.
Let's just have an open mind.
And that's kind of the interesting thing about science is also about disproving. Like if you can prove this, but can you disprove it also, right? Like something, just because you can prove it doesn't mean, like just because you can demonstrate something, that might be totally circumstantial. Can you disprove that what you just proved isn't true? And if you have both, if you can prove it this way and disprove that that is the only way, or right? What did I say? You can prove it as a way, but can you disprove it? If you can't disprove it, then you're right. Like, anyway. And I think the other side to that too, and this is a soapbox of mine, is part of the reason the scientific community often feels so strongly that teachings like this become a pseudoscience is because of the language that we use, that we steal vocabulary and use it so poorly and so incorrectly so often.
And so
that part I get. I'm like, stop
unclear.
it.
Very unclear.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a soapbox for another time, I suppose.
Down off the box.
Yeah. And in the midst of this, I know I'm supposed to pull up one of you right now, and I've totally forgotten which one of you it is.
Me.
Right. You up? It's your turn. Go.
It's my turn. All right, we're not done. As you can tell, we have a lot of fun delving into these topics. So if you would like to play along with us and get involved, everything that's going on at SEC, obviously, if you're watching now, you know about Truth Be Told. It is our weekly kind of come on here and have some fun and talk about some really cool topics. And this is always at 7:00 Eastern time. On Thursdays is The Gathering. Now, this is an opportunity for us to come together in small groups and talk about the topic even further and share from our own experience. So it's a wonderful way to get to know each other. It's a wonderful way to share our own experience and learn from each other. Now, you can register at soulevolutioncollaborative.org. You click on The Gathering, register for that, and you will get the link. Now, also on Sundays at 12:30, we have Strip Down Sundays. And this is an opportunity just to kind of get the meat and potatoes, or if you're vegetarian, the tofu of the Sunday experience, which is the talk, it's the message, it's the topic for the week. Just some inspiration to get your day started. Now, coming soon, we're going to have yet another Sunday experience. I won't give too much away, but just know that it is coming in a very short order. So lots of different ways to get involved here at soulevolutioncollaborative.org. Go over there, click, sign up for the events. You get all the information. There's content there. Just all the different ways that you can get involved with soulevolutioncollaborative.org. So thanks for joining, and now back to the show.
Prove it. That is our topic for the week. Prove it. And I love this because I have always been the type of person to never want to believe something just because somebody said it. You have to prove it to me. Or, better yet, I have to prove it for myself. And that has shown up repeatedly throughout my life. Ever since I was a kid, did I want to believe what the teacher said just because they said it, just because it was in the textbook? No, I wanted to go out and prove it. I wanted to get my hands on whatever it was that we were talking about and demonstrate for myself that this was in fact true or repeatable or demonstratable, that what we were talking about was true. And so this same thing has played out time and time again, having found this philosophy, this worldview, science of mind, that encourages us to go out and prove in the world what it is that we believe. And so prove it. We have this philosophy, science of mind, that says not only is this the way the world works, but you should go out for yourself and demonstrate for yourself that what we believe is demonstratable, that you can actually see this show up in the world. Science, knowledge about or study of the natural world based on facts learned through experiments and observation. So I love that part of the natural world, this world here, the physical world, based on facts through observation and experiment? Can you experiment with what you are seeing? Can we create facts about this physical world? There's some great debate about the pseudosciences of the world and what constitutes an actual science and not. And so it is good for us to recognize that and figure out for ourselves where we think we fit in that. Certainly, there is opportunity within this teaching to prove to ourselves that there are universal laws at play and that when we use these laws, certain things happen. Can we create experiments that are repeatable and provable? Well, this is the really interesting thing, because when we're talking about the science of mind and spirit, we are now talking about something that is actually beyond just the physical world, the natural world, right? What the sciences refer to as the natural world. And so in science of mind and spirit, we're talking about that which is beyond the natural world. And it's really interesting because that kind of is the crux of the science and religion conversation that has gone on for centuries, thousands of years, really, that do we live in a world where only the material is real, or do we live in a world where all of this is fake and only that which is conscious is real? And yet in science of mind, we have this belief that all of that is true, that there is both reality, the physical world is real, and it is just as real as the conscious world, and that there was that which can't be explained by science itself as we know it here, through Newtonian physics, right? This idea of if we can see it and prove it and touch it and feel it, then it constitutes science. That there is that which that type of science can't prove. If only the material world is real. Where did it come from? What created it? Was there something before that? And so we keep, with advancements in technology and observation and further experiments that I probably know nothing about, we are able to continue going back and back, right? We can go back to the Big Bang, we can hear the Big Bang and what we believe is the Big Bang. And we begin to prove more and more and further. So maybe at some point, are we able to prove that there was something prior to the Big Bang in the physical world? Okay, what created that? So there's always that question, what created the physical world? And is the physical world what creates consciousness? Well, we can kind of, through quantum physics, we have proved that there is a consciousness aside from the physical world. There has to be an observer that creates the collapse of the wave function, that which actually creates the movement of the electrons, the showing up of the electrons, and that which creates matter. So we have this science, this philosophy, this science, this way of life, this worldview that encourages us to prove all of these things, to prove that both, yes, the physical world is real, and this is how the law of this physical world shows up, and that there is that which is beyond time and space, that which is beyond physical matter. And so we perhaps begin to see how we apply science to that which is beyond the world that science was created in, that which science observes. And so I love this idea of prove it, this idea that we can use science, knowledge about or study of the natural world based on the facts learned through experiments and observations. So when we apply that idea, that definition, to that which is beyond this physical world, what are we able to prove and show and demonstrate through experiment and observation? What are we able to learn and declare as fact? And so prove it. You can, don't take my word for it. Don't believe anything I just said. Go out and prove it.
I feel like I was in graduate school again in some sort of business class. Professor Dan.
Yeah, right. Try to keep it like the light version, but
No, I love that though. But it creates this this is kind of like this back and back and back and back, of proving and holding holding our experiences up against the lens of these things. And so, I mean,
Right.
that's the only way that we can really kind of understand it is through our experiences. And we do that by, like I said before, getting out of that intellectual, only mode, and actually going and using our experiences, using our interactions, using our intellect, to prove these things, because our life then becomes the proof. The proof of all of this, how we show up, how we choose to use our minds, how we choose to use our hearts, and how we choose to use this kind of the spiritual nature. That is the proof, and how we use those things to navigate life and to interact with others.
I really am so drawn to that question, the idea of, does all this matter produce consciousness? I am firmly in the other camp that it is consciousness that is absolutely creating all of this.
Yeah.
That idea of, like, does the thinking mind, is that a product of physical evolution? Or is physical evolution a product of a thinking mind that is constantly developing and expanding and going deeper?
Yeah.
Creating more ways to do that.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
And I've almost started to wonder, because I too very much fall into that same camp of consciousness creates form.
Right.
And often lately have wondered if, have we been reactionary and swung so far to the other side? Like, are we missing out on the realness of what's here, right? Because what's here also goes back up into and informs that which has created, right? Like, there is a thought. It's not a one-way thing. It's not there's a thought and there's form, right? There's thought and then there's form. And the whole point is for form to feed back and go inform that which, the thought, a new thought we create. Like, that's where the teaching gets its name, right? It's not because we are creating some new thing, right? But there is a thought that comes into form. Form feeds back these ideas and creates a new thought.
It becomes a relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
it is like the perfect sort of this connective ability in relationship.
Which if you study much or anything really at all about this topic, the general camps are: there's realism, which matter is the only thing that's real. There's idealism, which, consciousness, thought is the only thing that's real. And then there's kind of the perennial philosophy, which is neither of those are true, but kind of both.
Right.
And so Science of Mind certainly falls into that perennial philosophy in a way, but I think also kind of begins to push that idea even further to say, like, yeah, they are both equally as real and equally as important. And I think, because even in the perennial philosophy, or, in my earlier days in Science of Mind, it's really easy to fall into that. Consciousness is so much more real that, like, yeah, matter is real, but consciousness is so much more real.
Right. That this is all like just an illusion.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
We're experiencing it to be very real for a reason. Let's let it be real.
Yeah.
What is it, Albert Einstein that said, that, like, we are living in an illusion. It's just an extremely persistent one. But essentially. But yeah, absolutely. We're here. Let's just experience what we're supposed to.
And what's really cool is, like, there are teachings and philosophies, like A Course in Miracle, for instance, firmly believes that this world of matter is not real. It is an illusion. And so what's real is consciousness. But there's a lot of nuance to that becomes really important. And you can still have that worldview and believe that, and still have that work. Like Science of Mind doesn't say, like, no, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Science of Mind says, yeah, no, that's right. That is correct and right for you because you believe that.
Right.
So the world will show up as an illusion for you because you believe that.
And Mary Baker Eddy would say the same thing. There's this
Yeah.
kind of illusion quality to things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think to bring it all back around to this idea of prove it, it's like we can't prove it thinking about it.
Right. Only by doing it.
Yeah, right. And so it's kind of like I want to start the episode all over again or watch it backwards, or I don't know, like we kind of had to go through all 3 segments and then watch them in reverse order, you know, Quentin Tarantino this or something, right? Like
Well, and it goes back to what Chris always says, application is the application.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Huh?
It is. I love it. Cool. Well, thank you all for hanging out with us today. As always, we have an absolute blast putting this all together and being here Tuesday nights, hanging out with you, getting to have this conversation, hopefully providing some insight and some inspiration into your life and hopefully some new ways to think about some stuff. So thank you for being here. And of course, check out all of the ways you can get involved with this community. If you're new here, welcome. Tuesdays is a great place to start. If you're looking for a deeper conversation, Thursdays. If you're just looking to kind of hang out, there's a plenty of activity and things going on the website you can check out and start diving into some videos, whatever works for you. So it is, we know that communities like this are communities that actually bring change to the world, and we are helping change the world by being actively part of what we refer to as the new earth, this new way of being. And it is through the activities Tuesday night, Thursday night, Sundays, all of the things that we're doing that are helping us shift our way of being, all of us, our way of being, to create this new earth. So if you are in any way able to support this mission, we gratefully accept your donations. Those are easily made possible on our website. Right in the menu, there is a donate button. It brings you to a simple, easy form that you can fill out. A one-time donation or a recurring gift, whatever works for you. Similarly, if you know somebody who is looking, because we know there are people in this world that are looking to support good ideas. If you know somebody who is looking to support a good idea, something that is making a difference in this world, feel free to direct them to this link, soulevolutioncollaborative.org, and to the donate button in the menu. All gifts are tax deductible. We are currently in outreach of the Orlando Center for Spiritual Living, part of Centers for Spiritual Living, nonprofit 501c3. So all gifts are tax deductible. Certainly greatly appreciated. And once again, just thanks for hanging out with us. We will see some of you Thursday, and for everyone else, we'll see you next week.